Millionaire follows her black nanny after work. And what she finds changes everything. Do you really think I don't know what you've been doing? Victoria Ashford's voice echoed through the marble hall of the mansion, laden with an arrogance that only decades of privilege can build. Running out every day at 5, refusing a ride, lying about where you're going. Letitia stood motionless in the doorway, her hand still clutching the key she had just used. At 32, she had learned that calm was her best weapon against people like Victoria. She didn't turn around. She didn't show any sign of haste. She just took a deep breath and smiled, a smile that held enough secrets to bring down empires. "May I ask what you're talking about?" she asked, her voice soft as velvet but firm as steel. Victoria descended the marble stairs like a queen descending to her throne of judgment. Her pink Chanel stood out against Letitia's simple uniform, a difference she made sure to flaunt whenever possible. "Don't play dumb with me. For 3 years you took care of my son like you were a saint, but lately—" She stopped a few inches away from Letitia. "Lately you've been different. Distant. Hiding something." What Victoria didn't know was that Letitia had spent the last 6 months documenting every racist conversation, every despicable comment, every subtle humiliation that this family considered normal. The small recorder in her pocket had captured things that would make even the Ashfords' closest friends recoil in shock. "Perhaps you're imagining things," Letitia replied, adjusting the strap of her purse with a calmness that made Victoria frown. "I always leave at the same time, always for the same reason." "What reason?" Victoria crossed her arms, a gesture that her diamond jewelry transformed into a display of power. "Because I've asked you 3 times and you always change the subject." Letitia finally turned, and her eyes met Victoria's with an intensity that made her involuntarily step back. "Do you really want to know?" There was something in her tone, a silent promise that some doors, once opened, could never be closed. Victoria hesitated for a fraction of a second, but her pride spoke louder. "I demand to know. This is my house, my son, and I have a right to know where my employee goes every afternoon." "Employee." Letitia repeated the word slowly, as if savoring its bitter taste. "All right, Victoria." The use of her first name without ma'am made the millionaire's eyes widen. "If you're so curious, why don't you follow me tomorrow? I'm sure you'll find out exactly what you need to know." The challenge hung in the air like a time bomb. Victoria felt something cold run down her spine. It wasn't fear, she tried to convince herself. It was just surprise. Letitia had never spoken to her like that before. She had never shown anything but respectful submission. "Maybe I will," Victoria murmured, but her voice lost some of its previous strength. Letitia smiled again, this time a smile that promised revelations. "Great. See you tomorrow, then." And she walked out the door, leaving Victoria alone in the marble hall with the unsettling feeling that she had just accepted a game whose rules she did not know. Outside, Letitia got on her bike and rode off into the sunset, carrying with her 3 years of silent humiliation and a plan that was about to turn the Ashfords' privileged life into rubble. What Victoria would discover the next day would change not only her perspective on her nanny, but on herself and the price some people pay for underestimating those they shouldn't. If you're enjoying this story of twists and justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what Letitia was hiding will make you rethink everything about jumping to conclusions and who really holds the power when the truth comes out. The next day, Victoria woke up with a strange feeling in her stomach. It wasn't fear. People like her weren't afraid of maids. It was more of a deep irritation at being challenged by someone she considered completely under her control. At 4:45 p.m., she was already sitting in the black Mercedes-Benz 2 blocks from the house, waiting. When Letitia left promptly at 5, she got on her bike and started pedaling, Victoria following at a safe distance. "Where the hell does this woman go every day?" she muttered to herself, watching Letitia pedal determinedly through the suburban streets. The drive took 40 minutes until they reached a neighborhood that Victoria recognized only from news reports, a place she would never willingly set foot in. Letitia stopped in front of a small office with a discreet sign, Community Legal Aid Center. Victoria frowned. Legal aid? Why would a nanny need a lawyer? Through the window, she watched Letitia being warmly greeted by a black man in a simple suit, who hugged her as if they were old friends. They sat down at a table covered with papers, and Victoria saw Letitia hand him something. It looked like a small electronic device. "Interesting," Victoria whispered, taking discreet photos with her cell phone. Her fingers flew across the screen as she sent a message to her best friend, Catherine, found out where my babysitter goes after work. Cheap law office in the ghetto. Probably planning some ridiculous lawsuit. These people always think they deserve more than they're worth. Catherine's reply came quickly. Be careful, Vic, fire her before she causes trouble. You know how vindictive these people are when they feel wronged. Victoria smiled dismissively. Letitia had worked in her home for 3 years, caring for little James with seemingly genuine devotion. But now it all made sense. She was probably gathering evidence for some fictitious employment lawsuit, inventing discrimination where none existed. People like her always try to turn kindness into exploitation, Victoria typed back. I gave her a job, a home, food, and now she wants more. Typical. As she waited outside, Victoria remembered conversations she had had with Letitia over the years. Little moments that had seemed insignificant at the time, but now took on new meaning in light of her growing paranoia. There was the time James had asked why Letitia couldn't use the pool during the sweltering summer. Because she's working, dear, Victoria had replied, and people who work for us have different rules. Letitia had heard everything, but she hadn't said anything. She had just lowered her eyes and continued tidying up the toys. Or when Victoria had found Letitia eating in the maid's room instead of the main kitchen. I prefer to eat here, Miss Victoria, she had explained. But Victoria knew the truth. She had made it clear from day one that certain areas of the house were reserved for the family. And those casual comments during dinner with friends, when they talked openly about the problem with servants these days, while Letitia poured wine in the next room. They don't know their place anymore, Victoria used to say. You give them an inch and they take a mile. An hour later, Letitia left the office carrying a manila folder. Victoria followed her back, her mind buzzing with conspiracy theories. When they got home, she waited a few minutes before going in, pretending she had just arrived from the spa. Letitia, she called as soon as she heard the nanny in the kitchen. We need to talk. Letitia appeared at the door, the same calm smile as always, but Victoria could swear there was something different in her eyes, a confidence that hadn't been there before. Where did you go today? Victoria asked directly, crossing her arms. The same place I always go, Mrs. Victoria. And that is exactly where, may I ask? Letitia tilted her head slightly. Didn't you follow me and find out? The question caught Victoria off guard. How did Letitia know she had been followed? She was sure she had kept her distance. I don't know what you're talking about, Victoria lied, but her voice sounded less firm than she intended. Of course not, Letitia replied, and for the first time in 3 years, Victoria detected a slightly ironic tone in her voice. But since you're so curious, maybe tomorrow you'll want to ask the right question. What question would that be? Letitia smiled, not her usual submissive smile, but something that carried promise. The question isn't where I'm going, Miss Victoria. The question is what I'm taking with me when I go. Victoria felt a chill run down her spine. There was something in the way Letitia said it, a quiet certainty that suggested knowledge about things Victoria would rather keep hidden. I don't like riddles, Letitia. I know, replied the nanny, adjusting the strap of her bag. You've always preferred things to be direct and simple. But sometimes the truth needs to be built slowly, piece by piece, until the complete picture is clear for everyone to see. That night, Victoria could hardly sleep. She called Catherine at 2 in the morning. She knows I followed her, she whispered into the phone. And she spoke in a way. I don't know, as if she knew something. Fire her tomorrow, Catherine advised. Before it's too late. But Victoria knew that firing Letitia now would be admitting defeat. And people like Victoria Ashford didn't admit defeat to people like Letitia, at least not before finding out exactly what game was being played. What she didn't know was that every despicable word, every racist comment disguised as a joke, every subtle humiliation of the last 3 years had been carefully documented. And that the manila folder Letitia had carried from the office contained much more than just papers. It contained the power to turn the Ashfords' privileged life into public rubble. Each new suspicion Victoria had only fueled something she couldn't see, a silent determination being forged by the very arrogance she tried to impose, unaware that every act of contempt was writing her own sentence of defeat. The next morning, Victoria woke up with an ironclad determination. If Letitia was up to something, she would find out exactly what it was. She called her personal assistant before even getting out of bed. Rachel, I need you to do a complete background check on my nanny, Letitia Santos. I want to know everything: where she was born, where she went to school, family, previous addresses, court cases, anything you can find. Anything in particular, Mrs. Ashford? Just precautions. These people sometimes have ulterior motives that we don't notice at first. While Victoria was plotting in her bedroom, just a few feet away, Letitia was preparing little James breakfast with her usual calm demeanor. But inside her purse, carefully hidden among tissues and candy, was a small digital recorder that had captured every word of that phone conversation. "Good morning, James," she said sweetly, helping the 6-year-old boy sit down at the table. "How about scrambled eggs today?" "Letitia," the boy asked with the innocent curiosity typical of his age, "why does Mom talk differently when you're not around?" The question made Letitia pause for a moment. "What do you mean, dear?" "She uses words that you taught me are bad. Yesterday she told Aunt Catherine that people like you always want more than they deserve." Letitia knelt down to the boy's eye level, keeping her voice calm. "And what do you think about that, James?" "I think she's wrong. You're the nicest person I know." At that moment, Victoria appeared in the kitchen, still in her robe, with her cell phone glued to her ear. "Yes, Catherine, exactly. She's probably collecting evidence for some ridiculous lawsuit. These people always do that when they realize the party is over." Victoria didn't realize that James and Letitia could hear every word. Nor did she notice the small device Letitia had discreetly activated in her purse. "I need to leave early today," Victoria announced coldly. "I have a meeting with my lawyer about domestic matters." "Of course, Mrs. Victoria. James will be well looked after." Victoria studied Letitia's face for a long moment, looking for signs of nervousness or guilt. She found only the same disconcerting serenity as always. 2 hours later, in the office of Marcus Thompson, a lawyer specializing in labor and civil rights, Letitia emptied the contents of a manila folder onto the desk. It wasn't just recordings. There were screenshots of text messages between Victoria and her friends, photos of humiliating moments she had discreetly documented, and even videos recorded when Victoria thought she was alone. "Letitia, this is..." Marcus stopped speaking, clearly impressed by the quantity and quality of the evidence. "You documented 3 whole years. Every insult, every racist comment disguised as a joke, every moment she treated me like I was less than human," Letitia replied, her voice firm but heavy with contained pain. "And it wasn't just me, Marcus. She does this to everyone she considers inferior: employees, delivery people, anyone who isn't part of her social circle." Marcus picked up one of the most recent recordings. This one from this morning's phone call. "She literally refers to you as those people, and suggests that you're plotting something against her." "The ironic thing," Letitia smiled bitterly, "is that I am plotting something. It's just not what she thinks." "What about her real background? When does she plan to reveal it?" Letitia took a deep breath. For 3 years, she had hidden the fact that she had 2 university degrees, one in psychology and one in law, as well as a master's degree in social policy. She had taken the job as a nanny not out of desperate financial need, but as part of academic research on domestic racism in high-income families. "Not yet. First, I want her to dig her own grave a little deeper." Across town, Victoria was sitting in the office of her private attorney, David Sterling, a 60-year-old man who represented exclusively families of the social elite. "I need to fire my nanny without giving her grounds for a labor lawsuit," Victoria explained. "I suspect she's gathering information for some kind of false legal action." "Based on what?" Sterling asked, taking notes. "Suspicious behavior, visits to cheap law offices, a change in attitude. Also," Victoria hesitated, "I may have made some comments that could be misinterpreted." "What kind of comments?" "Nothing major. Just observations about cultural differences. Things that any reasonable person would understand as casual remarks, but you know how sensitive these people are about everything." Sterling watched her carefully. "Victoria, I need you to be more specific. If there's any possibility of discrimination." "It wasn't discrimination." Victoria interrupted, irritated. "It was just realism. I pay her salary, provide her with housing and food. If she's not satisfied with the conditions, she should look for another job, not make up problems where they don't exist." Meanwhile, back at Marcus's office, Letitia showed him the last item in her collection of evidence, a detailed diary she had kept for all 3 years, recording not only the incidents of discrimination, but also the emotional reactions she had observed in little James. The child is being raised to normalize this kind of behavior, Letitia explained. James is a good kid, but he's already starting to repeat phrases he hears from his mother. Yesterday he asked why I couldn't use the pool like his mother's friends. Marcus closed his eyes, clearly disturbed. And you have all of this documented? Every conversation. Every moment she spoke about me as if I weren't human. Every time she made a point of reminding me of my place in that house. Letitia, with this material, we can do much more than just a simple labor lawsuit. This documents a systematic pattern of racial discrimination. We can make this public, expose not only Victoria, but her entire social network. Letitia nodded slowly. That's exactly what I want. I want her to face the consequences of every cruel word, every look of contempt, every moment she thought her wealth protected her from the consequences of her actions. That afternoon, when Letitia returned to the Ashford mansion, she found Victoria waiting in the living room with a tense expression. We need to talk, Victoria said, gesturing for Letitia to sit on the smaller sofa, never on the main one, where only the family sat. It's about my visit to the law office, isn't it? Letitia asked directly, surprising Victoria. How did you? Because you're not as discreet as you think you are. The black Mercedes 2 blocks away was pretty obvious. Victoria felt the blood rush to her face. So you admit you're plotting something against me? Not against you, Victoria. For justice. There's a difference, although I imagine that's difficult for someone like you to understand. Someone like me? Victoria stood up, indignant. And what exactly does that mean? Letitia smiled, not the submissive smile Victoria was used to seeing, but something that carried years of patience turned into determination. It means someone who has never had to face the consequences of her words and actions. Someone who confuses privilege with superiority. How dare you speak to me that way? I employ you. I pay your salary. And I take care of your son with love and dedication, despite every veiled insult, every racist comment disguised as a casual observation, every moment you made me feel less than human. Victoria went pale. I never what? Never told your friends that people like me always want more than they deserve? Never commented that you should hire someone more suitable to take care of James? Never suggested that I should be grateful to work in such a refined home? Every word Letitia said hit Victoria like a slap in the face. She had said exactly those things, but had always thought that Letitia didn't hear or understand the implications. You were spying on me. I was protecting myself. And documenting every moment you showed who you really are behind that facade of education and sophistication. Victoria felt the floor collapse beneath her feet. What do you want? Money? I'll double your salary, triple it if necessary. Letitia slowly got up, picked up her purse, and walked toward the door. What I want, Victoria, cannot be bought. I want justice. And tomorrow, you'll find out exactly what that means. When the door closed behind Letitia, Victoria remained alone in the room, for the first time in her privileged life feeling the bitter taste of true fear. Not the fear of losing money or social status, but the fear of facing the consequences of who she really was. Outside, Letitia got on her bike with a feeling of freedom she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Tomorrow, all the masks would come off. And Victoria would discover that underestimating someone based on the color of their skin was the biggest mistake of her privileged life. As she rode toward Marcus's office to finalize the last details of her revelation, Letitia had no idea that Victoria was already on the phone with David Sterling, desperately planning a way to fire her before it was too late. What neither of them imagined was that Letitia's true identity would turn that silent war into something much bigger than a simple dispute between boss and maid. The next morning, Victoria woke up determined to end the situation before it got out of control. At 8 o'clock, she was already dressed and waiting for Letitia with a letter of resignation in her hands. Don't even come in, Victoria announced when Letitia arrived at the gate. Your services are no longer needed. This letter formalizes your immediate dismissal. Letitia accepted the envelope with her usual serene smile. Are you sure you want to do this today, Victoria? Absolutely. And it's Mrs. Ashford to you. Actually, Letitia opened her purse and took out a folder. I prefer it's just Victoria. Or better yet, defendant number 1. Victoria felt the blood drain from her veins. What are you talking about? I'm talking about Dr. Leticia Santos, PhD in Social Policy from Columbia University, Master of Civil Law from Harvard Law School. Leticia handed her a business card. Specialist in racial discrimination and labor rights violations. Victoria stared at the card as if it were a poisonous snake. That's impossible. You're just a black nanny? A maid? Someone who should be grateful to work in your refined home. Leticia smiled. For 3 years, I documented every racist word that came out of your mouth, Victoria. Every despicable comment, every humiliation you thought I wouldn't understand. You deceived me. You lied about who you were. I never lied. I just didn't reveal my academic background. I was conducting research on domestic racism in high-income families for my doctoral thesis. You were a perfect case study. Victoria tried to regain control. It doesn't matter who you are. You can't prove anything. Leticia took a small digital recorder out of her bag. Want to hear your conversation with David Sterling yesterday? The part where you say people like me are too sensitive and that your racist comments were just realism? The device began to play Victoria's voice. It wasn't discrimination. It was just realism. I pay her salary, provide her with housing, food. Stop it. Victoria screamed, trying to grab the recorder. Or would you prefer this one? Leticia played another file. Your conversation with Catherine about how these people always want more than they deserve. Victoria recoiled, pale. What do you want? Money. I want justice. And at 10 o'clock this morning, a special report will air on Channel 7 News. The Silent Racism of the Elite, an exclusive investigation. Featuring 3 years of recordings, photographs, and documents showing how millionaire families treat their black employees. You can't do that. I already have. Journalist Marcus Johnson, yes, my ally from the cheap law firm, spent the night editing the material. Your friends Catherine, Rebecca, and Samantha are also featured in the report. Turns out, I wasn't the only employee they underestimated. Victoria felt her legs go weak. No one will believe you. They don't have to believe me. They'll hear her own voice. Leticia showed her her phone. I've already posted some excerpts on Twitter. #Elite Racism is trending. Take a look. Victoria took the phone with trembling hands. The comments were devastating, disgusting. How dare this woman talk like that? Boycott all Ashford family businesses. My God, my reputation, my contracts. Your contracts have already started getting cancelled. Premier Holdings terminated the agreement an hour ago. The charitable foundation has removed your name from the board. And the country club, well, they asked for your membership card back. Victoria collapsed to the floor, sobbing. Why did you do this to me? Leticia knelt beside her, her voice firm but not cruel. Because for 3 years you treated me like I was less than human. Because you laughed at my background, you mocked my dignity, and you thought your wealth protected you from the consequences of your words. I never meant to. You never wanted to take responsibility for what you said and did. Every racist comment you normalized, every moment you made me feel inferior, every time you talked about me as if I were your property, all of that had consequences, Victoria. Victoria looked at Leticia through her tears. What's going to happen now? Now you're going to learn something I've known for a long time. Actions have consequences. And underestimating someone because of the color of their skin was the biggest mistake of your privileged life. Leticia stood up, grabbed her bike, and prepared to leave. Oh, and about little James, don't worry. I'm sure he'll learn a lot from watching his mother deal with the consequences of her own prejudices. As she rode away, Leticia could hear Victoria's sobs echoing through the mansion. She felt no pleasure in her pain, she felt relief. Relief that the truth had finally been exposed, that 3 years of silent humiliation had found her voice. When she arrived at Marcus's office, he greeted her with a proud smile. The article is being shared all over social media. We already have lawyers from other domestic workers contacting us. Victoria Ashford has just become the national symbol of elite racism. Leticia nodded, feeling the weight of 3 years of silence finally lifting. Justice wasn't sweet, It was necessary. And sometimes, for it to happen, it takes brave people to go undercover, document the truth, and wait for the right moment for the masks to come off for good. 6 months after the exposé that rocked the American social elite, Leticia Santos sat in her new office in downtown Manhattan. The sign on the door read, Dr. Leticia Santos, Executive Director of the Institute for Social Justice and Labor Rights. The report had sparked a national wave of awareness about domestic racism. Prestigious universities offer her professorships, publishers wanted to publish her research, and civil rights organizations invited her to lead national campaigns. We have over 120 documented cases this week, reported Marcus, now her official legal partner. The hashtag elite racism has become a national movement. Little James, now in the care of his paternal grandmother after Victoria lost temporary custody, visited Leticia regularly. Away from the toxic environment that normalized prejudice, the boy was thriving. Aunt Leticia, he said during a visit, Grandma explained to me that Mommy was sick inside. Will she be okay? Victoria had lost almost everything. The mansion was sold to pay lawyers and fines, her business contracts evaporated, her friends from the social elite shunned her, and she now lived in a modest apartment, working as a freelance consultant when she could find clients. But there was an unexpected turn. After months of mandatory therapy and community service, Victoria sought out Leticia with a formal apology and a donation of $50,000, all the money she had managed to scrape together by selling her jewelry. It doesn't erase the past, Victoria, Leticia replied firmly. But it can be the first step toward building a different future for yourself. 2 years later, Victoria was working as a volunteer at a community center, teaching English to immigrants. It was humble, low-paying work, but for the first time she felt she was contributing to something bigger than her own ego. Leticia's institute had become a national reference. Her research became a best-selling book, and hundreds of cases of domestic discrimination were exposed through her work. You know what makes me most proud? Leticia told Marcus. It's not that I destroyed Victoria. It's that I built something that protects thousands of people like me. Leticia's real victory wasn't humiliating Victoria in public. It was turning 3 years of silent humiliation into a force that protected other women from going through the same suffering. On the wall of her office, framed, was a photo of James drawing at the table where she had made his coffee years ago. Next to it was the Institute's motto, the greatest revenge against prejudice is not to destroy those who discriminate, it is to build a world where discrimination is impossible. Victoria tried to break Leticia, but ended up forging a leader. Leticia learned that true justice is not punishing those who hurt us, it is ensuring that others do not have to go through the same pain. Their story proved that when privileged people underestimate those they consider inferior, they are digging their own moral grave. Because in the end, those who have the courage to document the truth and use intelligence as a weapon always defeat those who use only arrogance and money. If this story of transformation and justice touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that the best revenge against injustice is to build a more just world for everyone.